Oh, yeah, here you are.
Yeah, I'm out.
Well, when you guys are done doing whatever you're doing between
We're
the
good.
two
Go
of
ahead
you,
and start.
No,
I hear
I'm
that
just-
you're live.
I'm saying, like, when you guys are done downloading
film?
whatever the
Oh,
hell
my.
you're doing, you can start on that 83 CD set that I got over there.
From Interstate?
No thanks. I prefer Dire Straits.
You
Okay.
said 83 CD set. I thought you were going to tell me it was a CD or set of CDs with photo logs of 83.
Yeah. I want to see the 83 CD.
Oh,
Let's go.
well, I got your 83 CD right here if you
All
want.
right.
Yeah.
83, man.
I want my
Wonderful.
83 CD.
Dun, 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 dun.
All right, who is here today? We've got a celebrity all-star cast. We've got a Gribble Nation representative. I guess we have two technically. But,
Word.
yeah, there's Doug is here. We have Alps from Alps Roads is here. We've got Anthony, the music pirating whiz, is
Hi.
here. We've got David Golub is here. Nice to see you.
Yes, from East Coast
You
Roads.
too.
East Coast Roads.
Yep, go check it out.
Um,
EastCoastRoads.com.
And we've got, well, she's on Skype today. Let's see. There she is.
I'm here.
Yeah, Laura
Yes.
is Mrs.
We should tell our
Andrews is
audience
here.
what happened.
Well, yeah, you've got a little bit of explaining to do, young lady.
No, it's up to what you want to put on video.
Go for it all.
Yeah.
Up to you.
Oh, you're actually gonna have me on video. Ooh.
You
Well, then
are
I will
live.
pop. I will pop myself up then.
There you are.
Hooray! I am wearing my beautiful Taylor Swift "I Don't Know About You, But I'm Feeling 22" shirt from last year. We were hoping and planning to have a party and bring the show on the road this year to, the MD Roads headquarters, and then we all got COVID. So,
Since we're
Mike,
doing it in
Rainey,
Yeah.
me, and my mom, all four of us, COVID. So we're in quarantine. I'm feeling better enough to be able to talk on the episode.
Yay.
But Dan,
Yay.
yay! I'm better enough. But Dad still had to move the New Year's Eve festivities up to the Fishkill headquarters.
And since we are saying goodbye to 2022 and saying hello to 2023, goodbye Taylor Swift, hello Blink-182. What's my age again?
I fell in
Yes!
love with the girl at the rock show.
Unfortunately, I can't exactly wear the music video outfit for "What's My Age Again" on the show here.
You have. Okay.
Yep, so Laura is here. She's just joining us remotely today. And we also have another Maryland resident, Dan Greenstein, with us. Hello, sir.
Hello, Mr. Roadway Whiz. So I live in the People's Republic of Tacoma Park, deep Maryland, right next to D.C., 2 blocks from the Sam Abbott Citizen Center. Yeah, I've been living in Maryland for 28 years now. I was born in Syracuse, lived in southeastern Connecticut for a while. And other places I visit frequently are Hampton Roads because my in-laws are there. On the show today for the first time.
Yay.
Yeah, he's making his debut appearance. So
Yeah,
part of his initiation is that we all are going to leave the room when the video starts, and Dan's going to do all the narration for us.
Yay.
Yay!
Missing the Syracuse-style potato chips I brought. I did
Ooh.
not know this was a thing until a
Yeah,
couple weeks ago.
yeah, but I don't think anybody did.
Well, it's not here.
Are they extra salty?
They kind of taste like a mix between all dressed potato chips and something with dinosaur barbecue flavor.
I just figured salt potatoes are a thing out there.
See, my first impression was that they were like orange flavored.
They kind of look orange.
They
Color orange. not
yeah,
fruit.
well,
Yeah.
that too, yeah.
Well, of course, if you want to know more about Syracuse, you can tune into the Syracuse webinar we did a couple weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
I like how these shows segue into each other. You know.
Yes.
Well, speaking of which, you can watch the Syracuse webinar we did 2 weeks ago. Anyway,
It's
today...
also more amusing to think of segueing into each other as being people on segways crashing into each other. If you needed that image in your head, that you're welcome.
Yeah, better than electric scooter, I guess. Well, it's the same thing. I don't know.
I don't know which one would be more injurious.
So today we have a very special Maryland-themed program for you. Again, the reason why we came up with this idea was because originally we were all going to do this show down in Maryland. So we felt that it would make sense to do a Maryland-themed show from Laura's house down in Northeast Maryland. So obviously, you know, we can't do the original plan for the show, but we can still do the same content that we originally had in store for you guys. So there are paper plates, Steve, and
Yes.
they're right on the top of the refrigerator. I would really recommend and encourage you to get one.
Yeah, they're delicious cookies, but they are kind of crumbly.
Yeah, I do not need to like clean up the carpet again.
You will not.
Okay, well, okay. So we have a couple of full-length interstate drives for you today. 97 in Central Maryland and 83 from Harrisburg down to Baltimore. All right, let's see. Announcement. Well, we got a lot to get through, announcements-wise. Doug, what do you want to say about what's going on in Gribble Nation? What do you
Okay, so yesterday I uploaded an article about the natural bridge in Virginia, which London actually crosses over.
Not a fraud! I'm sorry to cut you off, Doug, but I just saw the slide. Carrigan Jr. is not a fraud, excuse me.
I prefer Billy Ripken in the bottom of his bat.
Rick face.
Yes.
So yeah,
I would just like to accept this slide as shown.
I think this slide's very good, isn't it?
I provide
Yeah.
you full acceptance.
So,
No!
Wrote an article.
Carrigan Jr. is not a fraud! The whole Kevin Costner thing happened after his streak, thank you very much. So he still would have had 21-31, even if that whole conspiracy theory was true.
Yeah, well, not in the words of a certain Philadelphia sports personality who's also on this slide. I just think it's hilarious that Laura and I were scouting for the Philadelphia meet one weekend, and I put on WIP, and Howard Eskin was on. She had never heard him before, and the first hour of her first show, listening to him, he goes on a tangent about how Cal Ripken is a fraud.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
that's
so,
your first
yeah.
experience, so that's good.
Yep. So Natural Bridge in Virginia, and I've been writing a lot of bridge articles. More covered bridges from the province of New Brunswick. And I uploaded a podcast recently about Virginia. Speaking of podcasts.
Yeah, well, I just put one out yesterday.
Ooh.
That was my first episode in a while. The subject of music on road trips was kind of the inspiration behind the show that I put out yesterday. So that's a little bit of a teaser for you. If you haven't already listened to that, you can certainly go and check that out.
Sorry for cutting you off, Doug. Sorry about that.
That's right.
Did you want to say something?
Not
Virginia's
usually
awesome.
Apologizing for cutting me off.
Well, while I was talking, thanks, Laura.
You're welcome, Dan.
You don't drive in New Jersey enough if you apologize for cutting people off.
Let's see. YouTube-wise, I'm working through Tulsa, Oklahoma videos, and there's going to be a lot of Oklahoma content in the month of January. By the time I get around to the rest of the freeways and then the turnpike system, which I'm going to be starting to upload next week.
Sparkly.
Can you believe we've done 100 live episodes together?
Yes.
Going back 3.5 years or so, something like that.
Wow.
It's been a really interesting addition to the channel, and it wasn't something that I thought we would do all that often, but a lot of the guys that I work with, you know, they're content creators in their own right, and it's great to be able to get them all together every once in a while to do shows and do commentary on things, and we've done 100 of these, and it's hard to believe we've got that much on record already. But
And make vaguely offensive jokes while live.
of course, that goes without saying. That's one of the requirements. So yeah, thanks to everybody who's been a part of this journey the last 3.5 years. I really appreciate it. I think we've got another 100 shows in us. I think, maybe.
Definitely.
That's so there's plenty more to talk about to sustain another 100 shows if we really want to. So, yeah, and thank you all to all the viewers out there who have watched too and have been a part of this journey, because you guys are part of the reason why we do this stuff. A lot of the times we just do these shows just to entertain ourselves, but we really do appreciate when the people actually come out and watch our shows as well. So thank you to all of you out there in the live chat, or if you've watched these shows after the fact. It really means a lot that we get some sort of coverage out there on the internets as a group, because my friends and I are fucking hilarious. If you haven't figured that out already.
Freaking.
Yeah.
Friggin'.
I know. Well,
Yeah, watch your language. There's a 3.5-year-old that listens to this show.
Well, she's not watching right now, is she?
No, she's napping.
Yeah, okay. So that's all right.
So fuck it. Okay.
Yeah. For your information, this is another episode in a series of shows we've done devoted to the state of Maryland and its various interstates and freeways and all that other stuff. This will be a sort of a supplemental show to some of the shows we've done in the past, like the ones you see on the screen here. They're all great. Of course they are, because I did them. And, if you haven't had the chance to go back and watch them, they are certainly worth your time, I think.
Especially the ones with Alps in them.
Which I'm pretty sure is all 3 of these.
Yep, I'm in all 3 of them too.
Well, I hoped you were.
Yep.
We can't do a Maryland show without having you involved.
Oh, well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, this is the second year in a row where we've had a late push of very important people who pass away right around New Year's. Mm-hmm. I didn't mention Franco Harris last week, but he passed. His death was very unexpected, I think. Yeah. He died a couple of days before the 50th anniversary of the play that makes him the most. That made him famous, really, The Immaculate Reception in 1972.
Yeah, Steelers were playing on retiring his jersey, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, I was actually really surprised that it hadn't been retired yet.
Yeah.
But they were going to do it anyway at that game, right? I think that was the idea. Yeah, that's just too bad. Because I think, again, that game was like 2 days later or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a legend still in Western Pennsylvania. He walks on the Ohio River in the middle of summer, and yeah, he's along with the rest of that Steel Curtain team from the '70s. But he's probably the face that most people recognize from that team. We recently had the World Cup played out somewhere in the Middle East somewhere, and we became aware during that time that Pele was in ill health, and he passed away a couple of days ago, I think.
Yeah.
Rip South Pacific volcano god.
Yeah, well, he's from Brazil. His nickname was the King of Football. He's widely regarded as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, footballers of all time.
The greatest.
He led Brazil, his home country, to 3 World Cup championships in the 1950s and 60s, and became something of a legend in the United States for his involvement with getting USA soccer off the ground in the 1970s, most notably with the New York Cosmos franchise.
Yeah, in one of his last games, he was in Portland, Oregon. I uncovered a picture when he was playing, I think maybe against the original Portland Timbers.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
It was shared by the modern day Portland Timbers.
Well, right. Clearly they're not. Yeah, they're clearly not the same organization. Yeah.
Yeah. But the legacy is there.
Absolutely. He left a mark all over the world with the beautiful game. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. This is another one that came up out of nowhere. I think Barbara Walters passed yesterday.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, sadly.
Known as a pioneer in television broadcasting, she was really ahead of her time in a lot of respects. She was the first woman to serve as co-anchor of the Today Show, among a lot of other television programs in the 1970s. She was one of the premier interviewers and journalists on TV for a long period of time, in the 60s right on up through even very recently with her work on the View. But she lived a full life professionally, and she certainly was someone who paved the way for a lot of women to get more involved in journalism and on-air broadcasting, especially. And lastly,
random fact: I used to love watching her on. I loved watching 2020 when I was a kid.
Okay.
It's probably a very weird thing to like as a kid, but I did, and I think it's just because I was always very charmed by Barbara Walters.
Yeah, so it was came out after TGIF.
Yes, it did.
Baba Wawa.
Then I woke up to hearing about the death of Pope Benedict this morning. He is probably going to be most known as the first pope in 600 years to abdicate his responsibility as pope. So he's the first person in at least 600 years to hold the title Pope Emeritus.
This is going to be therefore the first time in 600 years that a pope died and there's no conclave to be called.
That's true. Yeah.
I actually happened to see him in person. So in 2008, Pope Benedict had visited New York City, and one of the events was a motorcade down Fifth Avenue. I actually happened to find out about this a couple days before, so I went down to the city to see this. And I do have a picture of Pope Benedict in the Pope-mobile.
Yes, the Pope-mobile.
Yes, and I found that there's actually an article on Rebel Nation about me seeing the Pope.
Yeah, so maybe we should... Well, you already posted that link, right?
No, I did not.
Did you share that on the Gribble Nation page?
I did not.
Yeah, maybe that would be a good thing
You
for you
shared
to
it
do.
somewhere. I saw it.
Well, it was on his own page, I guess.
Oh.
Yeah.
Or
Right?
maybe you just shared the photo.
I did share the photo, basically on my personal Facebook.
I know I saw something about that.
Yeah.
It sounds funny to say because I also saw Pope Benedict in person. I saw him at the Vatican, but from a distance. But somehow the fact that you saw him in the Pope-mobile just seems so much cooler.
Yeah.
Is he really even a...
We are all road geeks, after all.
This is true.
And I'd say he was more of a, he was, like, compared to, like, Francis and John Paul, Benedict was more of an academic. I think he actually just preferred to, write and promote the Catholic faith, basically through more academic means.
Yeah, I think he kind of rose to prominence during John Paul's papacy. And he's originally from Germany, and he came of age during like the end of the Third Reich and all that stuff, and yet he kind of was able to, rise out of that and make quite a life for himself out of that. And certainly we remember him as one of the more recent, well-accomplished people in the papacy. That's for sure. You've been quiet over there. What do you got going? You have anything you want to add, or?
I'm trying to figure out why my computer's not working. Don't mind me.
All right. Well, while you do that,
My computer's working. I don't know what your problem is.
It's
I-97.
Woo!
First part of today's program. This video is about 20 miles in length, and it will cover the entire interstate for you.
As it's been noted, you can get a pizza, clinch a 2DI, and have it still be warm when you get to the other end.
That's right.
That's right, because I-97 is only 17.53 miles long.
Jeff notes thankfully Betty White didn't pass away again this year.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of people who passed, around New Year's, that was a rough one. I know for a lot of people.
Yeah, I was down in Maryland last year when I found out about that.
I figured out my problem.
And I'm like,
Far old.
Is I-97 the shortest 2DI in the country?
Yes, it is.
Is it?
or
Yes,
is
it is.
shorter?
H2.
Well, are we counting?
Sorry,
those,
it's the shortest in the 48.
14.
I-2 or I-14 might be the shortest now.
No, two is definitely longer.
Yeah.
2 is longer now.
I will note, though, that at least 14 is going to be lengthened, whereas I-97 is going nowhere further.
Yeah.
Although, with a little bit of work, you could connect it to 83.
How about
Yeah, not
I-11?
happening.
11's pretty short, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
No,
that's
it just
not
got lengthened.
No,
But it is-
Well, even,
yeah.
even without going north of I-15, 11 is definitely longer than 97. You have to figure 11 goes all the way from the bridge to downtown Las Vegas.
No, but that's new that it goes past
All the way,
215,
that's like 5
515
minutes.
interchange. Until this past year,
Still
it
does.
ended at 515, 215. But now it goes much further.
Well,
and-
yeah. Well, once they
They'll
get all the
post it.
signage and all that, yeah.
But it officially does, so.
I'm just glad I got pictures of I-515 in Nevada while it existed. Yeah.
Here.
So I think
Yeah,
Laura gave us a little bit of an intro into I-97. It's what, 17 miles, something like that.
17.53.
Okay.
It's the only two-digit interstate not to connect to another two-digit interstate, and it's the only two-digit interstate entirely within a single county. Again, this is excluding Hawaii, but it's entirely within Anne Arundel County, Maryland.
Yes, please
well,
exclude,
okay, and entirely within a single county is also true about I-11.
Oh, really?
I think
Or
11
not.
is true for the other
Because
point,
it ends
though.
at the state line.
I feel like 11 just doesn't.
I'm
count
assuming
because it's
14
incomplete.
also.
But even here's the thing.
Ooh, I-42.
Even with it ending at 215, 515, I-11 is already longer than from the state line to the 215, 515 junction is longer than I-97.
Is I-87 completely in Wake County?
Oh, and look, we're already done with 97.
All right.
We're going to spend the entirety of this drive talking about what interstates may or may not be shorter than it.
That might be more interesting than actually talking about the drive.
I mean, we
but-
could talk
Wait,
about
county roads.
Wake
I-197.
County roads.
Hey, county roads.
We could talk about 197 and
What county
297, but
roads?
County
we're not
roads.
to the 3 interchange yet.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Well, I have a bunch of history to say, but I want to give Dan G the floor because I know you know a lot about I-97.
So there's so historically there have been two main routes between Baltimore and Annapolis, one on the east side of the Severn River and one on the west side of the Severn River. And the one on the east side has typically been more prominent throughout most of the 20th century. But the west side route is kind of one prominent piece of that is the General's Highway, now Maryland 178, which George Washington, is like much less improved, to resign his commission from the Continental Army in 1783. But back when the Maryland State Roads Commission was formed, they focused on the east side of the river, connect what's now Maryland 2. I guess now what's now Maryland 648, going down from Baltimore to Annapolis. They focused on that, got that all paved, and then but they did focus later on the west side with their Robert Crane Highway, building that down from Glen Burnie to southern Maryland, and that became Maryland 3. So part of that is much of what I-97 is now, the middle section. So there were plans to build a freeway all the way down on the east side of the river from Baltimore and Annapolis, and part of that, half that effort is Maryland 10, but that never got finished. They stalled in the 60s and 70s. They were considering making it a toll road at the end of that effort, but then they gave up and made Maryland 10 go to where it ends now. So they refocused and on the west side of the river. So this stretch you're seeing here, this long stretch without exits, that was the Greenfield section of I-97. and that was built in the 80s, in mid to late 80s, from US 50 up to near the Maryland change, because there was a piece of Maryland 32 between 178 and the Gambrels area that was already built. I think it was a Super 2. And so they incorporated that into that and upgraded the interchange that we're going to see in a few minutes with Maryland 3 and Maryland 32. The second segment, after this 4-lane segment we're watching right now, they reconstructed on the course of Maryland 3, because it was Maryland 3 was a 4-lane divided highway, in some places at a wide median with businesses, some which you'll still see along parts of Maryland 3 south of I-97. That was upgraded in place, and another set of lanes added, and then the original, the rightmost roadway is now Veterans Highway. It's not a state highway, but that segment provides a local alternative to I-97, which is right along it. And then the last segment of I-97 is the Glen Burnie bypass. The 3 business branches off, and that was built in the mid-50s, slightly before the interstate system, and it was built originally as a bypass for US 301, back when US 301 went to Baltimore. So US 301 was 3 years, and then US 301 was moved to its current course on the eastern shore, and that became Maryland 3 again. But then eventually, much of the last part of the construction related to I-97 was reconstructing that part of the Glen Burnie bypass, expanding to 6 lanes, making better interchanges, and so and that finished. The last parts of that finished in the mid-2000s with the Maryland 174 interchange being upgraded.
I wanted to jump in real quick because we're now at the 3 interchange. So this is where I want to point out the plans were for a while that Maryland 3 from here south would be Interstate 297, and what would happen is 97 would follow its current course towards Annapolis and would then curve back on US 50 back to DC again. The little stretch into Annapolis would have been Interstate 197 along 5301, and Highway 3 from here south to the 5301 junction would have been a full freeway 297. So essentially, sort of like what's done in Georgia, I think it's 275 down there. But the 3-digit route would actually be the short way if you're continuing on the freeway, and the 2-digit route would be the longer one connecting to the major city. Macon is
I think 475.
475.
Macon,
475 bypassing. Right. So you're actually, one of the cases when through traffic should take the 3-digit route because it's actually shorter.
Yeah, because the control city on 475 north is Atlanta.
So so this got laid out, but by the time they were ready to upgrade 3, they no longer saw a freeway as viable, and so 297 never came to be. 97 ends where it does now instead of curving back on 50, and that's when they introduced the secret 595 that lives there now without a sign.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you do know my favorite thing about Macon, Georgia. The hockey team there was called Macon Whoopee.
Yeah.
Seriously.
That's even better than bacon. Okay.
I was going to say, yeah, you call it bacon. Now, so also looping back to prior discussion, sorry folks, not only is I-14 longer than I-97, it exists in 2 counties.
Ah.
Wow.
So my info was correct. I think Dan G did an amazing job. I just want to add in a few more details.
Please.
So basically the lane widths of I-97 it's 4 lanes from US 50 301 to Maryland 3, and then it goes up to 6 lanes from there north to 695. It was not a part of any original freeway plans of the 50s and 60s. It came about as part of the Baltimore-Annapolis Transportation Study, which started in 1978. As Dan said, that the first proposal was looking to continue Maryland 10. A big reason why they did not go that route was because it would have cut through waterfront communities, and land acquisition costs would have been prohibitive. But part of what makes the the section, why they moved it further west, the section between exits 1 and 5, a good part of it goes through state land, where the Crownsville State Hospital was. So that made it a lot easier for getting it built. But that also, it was putting it there kind of split the difference, right? As Dan G was talking about, like Western more route with 3, Eastern more route with Maryland 2. Instead, 97 kind of cuts the difference in the middle. The section between exits 1 and 5 was completed in 1989. It's the only section of the southern section parallel to 178 was the only part of 97 that used a new alignment. There's no exits in the first 4 miles because of development concerns. Oh no, NIMBYism. Then the middle section between exits 6 and 12. Just to clarify, that originally Maryland 3 was a divided highway, and so the southbound section is what got turned into I-97, and then the northbound section of 3 was then turned into two-way Veterans Highway. And then the northernmost section is the upgrade of the old Glen Burnie bypass.
The 3 is, the two sides of it are very far apart for a good portion of its journey, so I guess that was the case all the way up to pretty much Glen Burnie. It's rare for a divided highway to have that much room between it, but...
Well, right, that's because they have businesses in the middle. That's the thing there.
Yeah.
It's a developed median.
So it must have been that all the way up, basically.
Okay. Yeah, it was. And it's very interesting, if you go along Veterans Highway, you can actually, and you look where some of the businesses are, you can see where they've got still blocked off, 30 years later, where their business driveway would have continued.
Nice.
To the southbound section.
This highway is going to be over in a few minutes, so I want to make sure that we have time to address this topic. Where does the I-97 designation come from, and why does it apply to this highway? I know that a lot of people in road enthusiasm like to, talk what about this highway because of its route number. Let's talk about the route number, why it exists, and are we stuck with this interstate being as long as it is permanently?
Yes. Yes, we are.
Well, it is wholly east of I-95, so it's in the right place.
That is true.
Not legislatively. I don't think it's a legislatively mandated number, so we're not stuck with it. Unlike that interstate in Pennsylvania.
I wonder which one you're talking about.
Yeah, heavy subtext there.
I think the fact that it was meant to be something more with, the 197 and 297, with that context of history, it makes a lot more sense that it was given its own number. Right. Because otherwise, it should be 595 or 995.
It would have been an interstate from D.C. to Baltimore, so it would have been, it would have linked 2 major cities.
But so does 95, which is part of the... Yeah. They wanted this to link to Annapolis. I think the Navy link may have played a role in this being 2 digits, that they thought Annapolis was important enough to warrant a 2-digit interstate to the state capital.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I've...
enter Annapolis.
That's kind of the vibe that I've gotten over the years looking into the matter, is that Annapolis really wanted a mainline interstate connection, and they weren't satisfied with an upgrade of 50, because they weren't going to get, I-66 going across D.C. or something like that, so... the next best option was something coming down from Baltimore. And then, I do think there is something to the naval aspect of this, too. The Naval Academy being, God in central Maryland.
The national system of interstate and defense highways.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, you got to think other interstate highways, 781 up, connecting over to Fort Drum. Mm-hmm. That was something that the military had wanted, too. So.
Yeah.
So it's not a far-fetched idea to say, okay, the military may have a role in getting interstates to areas that are important for the military.
Yeah. So
after I-197 was dropped, then they thought they were going to number I-68, but then that designation was instead used in Western Maryland.
And see, I don't know why you couldn't say, why can't it be 66?
Well, that's been an idea that's been thrown around too.
If
Yeah.
95 had to use the Beltway, 66 would use the Beltway.
Well, if you look at beltways like in Indianapolis, where Interstates
Yeah.
74 and 69 use parts of that beltway, so it's not it's not unheard of for that to be the case. This is the northern terminus of I-97 here at the Beltway, south of downtown.
And the wonderful 648, highly recommended route.
Yeah, so I would say, there's also been a lot of talk about, can't you just absorb 83 and 97 and make one unified designation?
Using the Baltimore Beltway.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
it.
the numbers are fine the way they are.
And people by this point, like the people who live locally,
You're
that's what they're
on
used to.
I-895A now, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, should we talk about the spurs
mile
of
markers.
Yes, the spurs of I-895 are interesting. Once you're on this part of the highway, you cannot exit until you've passed through the Harbor Tunnel toll plaza.
Unless you make an illegal U-turn.
It becomes 895B.
We're
Yeah,
law abiding.
So 895A is just a short connector to 97, north of 695, which in itself is a bizarre consideration. They couldn't extend 97 up to meet 895. That had to end at 695.
Yes, well, then you would have had mainline 97 passing through this yield sign on a single lane on the bird.
But we're about to do a highway that does that anyway. So.
Well, he's not wrong.
Well done, yeah.
Yeah, so 895B is the main connection, 895 down to 2, and 895A is this little spur that we just took.
Yes, this does also mean that in order to clinch all of this, you need to pay that toll a minimum of 3 times.
Like 895 and the A and B.
Yeah.
What do you mean 3 times?
Yeah.
Because 895B continues south of
Yeah,
895A.
so you go north, you pay the toll, you U-turn, you pay the toll, and come back down B. You're done.
Yeah, and then you haven't got
Oh, then you have to clinch 895. So what you really want to do is go up to 895, illegal U-turn in the median.
Right.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Well, I think too, it's worth noting a few things. One is why I-97 just can't be extended north is because the issue with not the rest of 97 not being a toll road. So it's maintained by State Highway Administration, whereas 895 is a toll road, which is MDTA. It seems like it would just be easy enough to extend the number, but it's 2 different agencies that maintain those roads. Something I wanted to point out, and there's been some chatter in the chat about when we were talking about the Glen Burnie bypass, that there's the original road was Maryland 3. And then with the Glen Burnie bypass, you had Maryland 3 business. But then once 97 was built, Maryland 3 business remained, but Maryland 3 was decommissioned. So
when was
it's
3 decommissioned, Laura?
when was it?
Was
That's
it
a question for.
decommissioned as soon as 97 was built, or did they coexist for a few years?
That's a question for Mike. Mike, can you answer that in the chat? Mike is upstairs napping with Rainey, but I see he's active in the chat. So
he's not actually napping. Okay.
He's not. He's watching over her. He's resting still. You gotta rest with COVID.
Yeah.
But so yes, Mike, answer that question, please. But
I just want to note here that I'm going to do something that at the end of this video that I suspect is going to make Steve legitimately angry.
Yes.
Well, so Laura was in the car with me when we filmed this, and Laura knows exactly what I'm talking about.
So we're coming up to where I would make that U-turn.
Well, so my ultimate goal on this day was to go back south to Annapolis, and there was some sort of incident inside the Harbor Tunnel. So I basically drove the most expensive U-turn in Maryland.
Yeah, right there, you could have used the median. I don't know what you're doing.
But yeah, but Goody, following the law and all that stuff.
I was just commenting to Anthony here. I did that in Indiana SR 912 Klein Avenue Bridge. Got to the automatic toll, and I was like, I don't have to pay this toll. And I U-turned right at the toll. Because I already drove the old road, so I was like, oh,
Well,
the old road.
well,
here.
and nobody
Because-
uses that road anyway.
Yeah, that's
so
the difference. That's why I noted here.
And
so
you
can
just
note-
you
yeah, can
just
make
cite you cite clinched around the toll gantry.
Well, no,
or
I
whatever.
legitimately the old road used to diverge right there, so it
Oh.
was actually a clinch. But
Oh, jeez.
no, I wanted you to raise that point that there's no traffic there. Here, right? It's
Yeah, I
unsafe
can't.
To try
You
that.
can't really do that. No.
No, I do not actually recommend that at all.
So I actually, I can see Steve being very uncomfortable right now in his seat because he's like, "Why are you paying two $6 tolls consecutively just to make a
I see
U-turn?"
I see the sweat pouring down his face.
I had to clinch 895A and 895B myself, so I paid this toll. I
Okay.
understand.
All right. Well.
I did
Oh,
them on
so
different trips,
I-
so I didn't pay the toll multiple times in succession.
But you still did it. Either way, you have to do it to do it. So.
So I have the answer from Mike, but not because he answered the question, but because I went on MD Road's website to find the answer.
Yay!
Yay! So all Maryland Route's 3 signs were removed on the multiplexed I-97 portion in 1995.
Yeah, they were there
So,
for years, right?
If we look at my notes to see when that last section was opened, it was upgraded in stages from 1994 to 1997. So yeah, they pretty much took down the signs as soon as it was done.
There were definitely signs showing 97 and 3 together. I think
Yes, so there are at the end. So what's really interesting and bizarre is that
Here, there's an exit
at
to
the-
Body Street.
at the I-97 where 3 North merges into I-97, there is this tiny portion where they are multiplexed, and then there's a shield that says 3 ends.
Was that right?
Yeah, Mike, I can hear the echoing. What are you doing? It's okay. I just answered the question. Don't worry about it, honey. You can go back to resting with Rainey.
Oh my god.
Duty called.
I posted a link in chat. My MD3 page has 3 and 97 signed together on an overhead, so that's where my recollection.
That has to. I assume that photo is not from 1995, so that's one that
Right.
survived.
Right. The signs are from then, but the photo.
Right. So basically, what happens is that when 3 North merges into 97, it's multiplexed for a tiny portion, and then you see a 3 ends shield. So it's weird because so they decommissioned everything Maryland 3 north of that, but then they left the business route, which is 5 miles, the Old Crane Highway.
And was probably
So it's-
always business 3, even when the Glen Burnie bypass was regular 3, it would make sense, and then they just left it instead of renumbering it to business 97.
Right, and the reason for that, as Mike said in the chat, is apparently that in Maryland state MUTCD, that business interstates are not allowed.
Really?
Yeah, business interstate shields are prohibited in the state's MUTCD.
Strange. Okay.
I agree,
It
strange.
could just be regular 3 at that point, but.
I agree. I personally think that they should just take 3 up Veterans Highway, and then connect it with Business 3 and just make that all 3 again.
From the business banners, and then you're good.
Yeah. Yeah, but then it's green.
All right.
Are the signs
so-
there actually green?
Business 3, yeah.
Oh, they are. Well, all right.
Yeah.
fine.
Instead of black font, they're green font. Yeah.
Okay. They did that thing.
Yeah, it's the Maryland special, right?
Yep.
Yep.
It's not the only place it's done there.
Oh yeah. Do we want a 5-minute break or should we roll into the next highway?
Considering how short that was, I say we just roll on.
Just roll on.
We could take
Keep
breaks.
going, huh?
We can take breaks as we're watching 83.
Yes.
In Pennsylvania, it's pretty much the same thing for much of its distance once you get out of Harrisburg.
Yeah. All right, so 83 in its entirety runs from I-81 east of downtown Harrisburg all the way south through York and southern Pennsylvania into downtown Baltimore. And it's about 85 miles, and we will drive that in its entirety in the next few seconds.
US 111.
While I'm thinking of
Yes.
it, our show next week is Atlanta. So hope you can join us for that. I am hoping that Doug can join us for that because I just want him to be able to talk about the history of the NHL in Atlanta.
I own 2 Thrashers jerseys.
They
They were clearance through hockeymonkey.com.
Yeah.
It's sad I can't join you for this because I have family down there, so I
My
know Atlanta pretty well.
older brother went to Georgia Tech for a year.
Okay.
That's my
Ooh, all the other tech
only
schools.
connection to Atlanta.
Ooh, the civil engineers that are number 1 in the nation. I'm jealous.
Okay.
But I don't think I'll be able to. I'll be in Syracuse next week, and so I
Yeah, I'll be in Cape Cod.
may not be able to pull it off.
83. Here we go.
Enjoy some of the Harrisburg mess.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Here we go, here we go, here we go!
Okay, so 83, as I said, begins here at the interchange with I-81. Couple of things to talk about here with 83 in Harrisburg. One is that it is in a constant state of reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair to say. PennDOT has a long-term vision for I-83 to make it at least 6 lanes wide between the 81 interchange and as far south as the P8 Turnpike.
Emphasis on long term.
Yeah, so
Emphasis on not far
Well, it's
enough.
Pennsylvania.
in Pennsylvania, long-term is like 50 years. So don't expect it to be done anytime soon.
With this
but-
being my regular drive, it needs 6 lanes the whole way.
So PennDOT has divided this project up into several different sections. Section 1 was completed, I believe, last year, or in the last couple of years. And this covers the main line of 83 from the 81 split down to a point just north of the Eisenhower interchange.
Talk about it.
Section 2, I can tease it for you right now, would involve a complete reconstruction of the Eisenhower interchange, which is where I-83 meets I-283 and US 322, just east of downtown Harrisburg. That contract is now entering final design, I believe, and right-of-way acquisition has begun on that. So construction on that could begin as early as next year. It would take several years to complete. I posted on my Roadway Whiz page not long ago a couple of renderings of the project scope and of the new look interchange. It's one of those things that they're going to have to do in several different phases, staged over several different years, because there's just not a whole lot of room to work with there. But they're going to, basically the idea is going to be to divert mainline I-83 away from the main interchange itself. So 83 will have more than 1 lane per direction by the time this is complete.
It does right now if you follow the original route.
The original route, maybe.
You go straight down 322, there's another ramp to get right back on 83 again, and that's your second lane. There you go, all set.
Well, then, meanwhile, you can have the Kool-Aid at Jonestown Road.
Yeah, so this is the Section 1 contract that we're driving through right now. Not all that long ago, this looked very different. It looked like your quintessential antiquated Pennsylvania Interstate. It looked a lot like the P8 Turnpike, 4 lanes, but the Jersey barrier is right up against the left fog line, and you had a shoulder, but you were very much penned in by a tree cover on both sides. This project that was completed recently really opened up this whole stretch.
It looks a lot more like US 202 now.
Well, it actually looks like a somewhat modern freeway, finally.
I mean, there's a reason why I usually take 581 when I'm trying to go through Harrisburg instead of 83.
Well, 83 is a disaster
Yeah.
at times. Yeah, this project has made it somewhat better, but you still have the Eisenhower issue, and you still have the Harris Bridge. That's still a choke point.
Well, they did a lot.
But yeah, 581 I like a lot more than 83.
They did a lot of work just east of the Harris Bridge, or just or along it, really. I think they did some work there, but there's another segment there that they haven't worked on.
Yeah, so
We'll be
so Section 2 is what we're coming up on now, the reconstruction of the Eisenhower interchange, which was built mostly originally in the 1960s. They kind of took some leaps of faith as far as future traffic patterns in the area are concerned. They weren't expecting the mainline 83 movement here to be the predominant movement. And you can kind of see that when you look at how the interchange is laid out and built. I-83 technically is 1 lane wide per direction through this interchange.
I would imagine they would want you to use 283 to the turnpike to pay them a nice little toll.
Well, I don't know. I'm sure
that goes in
with-
entirely the opposite direction.
Yeah, but then it takes it right back to 83.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there were political considerations here as well, but the fact that the 83 322 movement out towards Hershey got priority here is interesting, and not the mainline interstate.
But that was the original interchange for a number of years, so that the old highway just flowed straight into that little 320.
Well, it's not like they shoved the interstate into a pre-existing interchange. The interchange was built after the 83 corridor was established. So that makes me scratch my head about what exactly they were thinking here. Because you're right, it does seem like that would be the case. And that was my initial inkling as well. But the interchange was built after the 83 designation was approved through Harrisburg along the alignment it has today.
I had to check into
So
this.
you have 83 south following this single lane ramp through the middle of the interchange.
There
And
we go.
if you are following 83 north, it's even worse because it's a left-hand exit.
It's a bypass 230, followed that road, and then came to an intersection. Yeah, I'm seeing that.
So this whole disaster here is set to be reconstructed as part of Section 2 of the I-83 master plan, which, as I said, could see construction in the next year or two. If you want to look ahead a little bit, the next couple of miles here, what we're entering now is Section 3. That would involve widening existing 83 between the Eisenhower Interchange and the John Harris Bridge at downtown Harrisburg. This section and Section 4, which is on the west bank of the Susquehanna River, have been put into the master plan, but there is no funding or timeline for their construction.
Yes, well, and that's because Pennsylvania wanted to toll that bridge, but Pennsylvania adventures with wanting to toll things are.
Was there a proposal to toll the 83 bridge?
Yeah, so PennDOT had a whole thing where they wanted to toll a bunch of bridges with the idea that they were going to improve bridges and approaches there too.
Love this approach.
Because I think that is it related to the same thing from a few years ago when they were trying to toll I-80 or something like
well,
that?
not directly, because when they were trying to toll I-80, they were trying to take advantage of a pilot program in federal law that allows for tolling of three mainline interstates that were built with federal funding. Those three slots, still none of them have ever actually been used. That died out of politics. The intent to toll bridges was trying to take advantage of the same loophole in federal law that Rhode Island did, where it says, hey, you can toll bridges as long as you use the money to improve the bridge or approaches to the bridge.
Yeah.
So they wanted to toll bridges and use the money for so they would have tolled this bridge and used the money to improve the bridge and the pieces of the highway on the either side of the bridge, and you figure, all right,
because they could legislate that. Oh, this is the bridge approach.
But that proposal ended up being DOA too, because nobody likes
I'll
tolls.
tell you, I'm looking back at the 1968 historic aerial. It's a very good one because they're just starting to clear out the area for the new interchange. All the houses are gone and stuff, but the old highway is still there, showing two freeways coming to a signalized intersection with a backed up left turn.
So it's possible that 83 had an signal, a traffic light.
Yeah,
For a
they
period
may
of
have,
time,
They may
yeah.
have had to withhold designating. It may have still been US 111 at that point.
Right. Well, in the
Yeah.
1960s,
Bypass
there was
230.
right. There
Yeah,
was,
so this is
yeah.
the John Harris Bridge over the Susquehanna River. Downtown Harrisburg is immediately to our right.
make sure you don't get herded up the ICU.
This bridge, I think, had some work done on it relatively recently.
Yeah, so part of the Section 3 contract for the 83 rebuild would involve widening this bridge and doing basically a full replacement of it.
And we just passed by a very nice bridge to the right as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of nice bridges over the Susquehanna and
Arch
Harrisburg.
bridges
Yeah,
and what have you.
yeah, a
Wait,
lot of
there's
the
a nice
old
bridge
railroad
over-
bridges.
There's a nice
Oh, I just wanna throw in a comment.
Maryland?
Or
That's
Virginia.
nice.
Or
I think
Virginia.
that's the nice Middleton Bridge.
Yeah.
Ah,
But there is you will want to walk the Walnut Street Bridge if you're there.
You will want to check out the signs that are
Mark-
still standing at the west end of it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Or-
now that I can get a word in, I just wanted to back up what Steve said regarding the Eisenhower interchange. Based on my notes, I-83, the route received its designation in 1960. The first section opened in 1954, but the highway was completed in 1971 with the massive Eisenhower interchange in Harrisburg. So that was the last part of the highway to be finished.
Yeah, so the Eisenhower interchange was the last piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I-83 more or less replaced US 111 between Harrisburg and Baltimore.
Yeah, so as we turn south here,
from
this
the trumpet
point,
interchange,
from this point,
which in this direction is okay, and
Yeah.
there's a few rumble bars in this interchange and other approaches.
so just to talk for a second about Section 4, which we're traversing right now, that would involve rebuilding that trumpet interchange we just passed through with basically a 3-level T interchange with flyovers and all that stuff. And also, you probably would have these interchanges here between 581 and the Turnpike either partially closed or reimagined in some way so that it's not an absolute cluster where you have yield signs at the top of every ramp.
Oh yeah.
So that would all have to be addressed as part of Section 4. Section 4, as far as I can tell, ends just south of the PA Turnpike. It's possible that in the future PennDOT may split Section 4 into multiple contracts, because this does seem like a heck of a lot to include in one contract. But that's kind of how things stand right now. And that is kind of the summation of what's going on 83 in Harrisburg. So stay tuned over the next 50 years or so. Maybe Rainey, when she's a grandma, she'll be able to drive it when it's fully finished.
This is what we have to do. Let's all take a nap. Good night.
So let's talk about US 111 because that was the
Susquehanna Trail.
Yeah, that's the old highway that predates I-83 between Harrisburg, York, and Baltimore.
And that is what a lot of this freeway was built as, which is why it's so substandard.
Just like 78.
It was built to be 22.
Although until recently, now they've really redone it, but
Parts of it.
Yeah, they're working on
a lot of it.
It's a lot better than it was.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
It's pretty much just about all redone at this point.
I mean, they've still got the rero at Midway.
Right. That I think is going to stay.
Yeah.
People will be angry.
You want me to unplug that?
Yeah.
You talking about New Jersey or Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, okay.
No, the part of New Jersey was massively redone.
Yeah.
Yeah. So built is the now no longer in place US 111 since I-83 entirely replaced it.
Yeah, pretty much from Lemoyne south is where it pretty much practically follows the path right along Susquehanna Trail, which is the old US 111, which today actually is not a state route in Pennsylvania. Pre US 111, it was Pennsylvania 4, and Mike and I have talked about how we think they should bring that back. But Susquehanna Trail is not a state route.
It's not a traffic route. It's quadrant routes.
Well,
yes,
most of it. Part of it is Pennsylvania 892 here I'm seeing.
Well, yeah.
Slow truck.
Yeah. I have comments, but that's it.
Development right up on the highway here.
Yeah, so this mashup of the video that we're watching is a combination of footage from 2018 and 2020 in Baltimore City, and as recently as a couple of months ago for the Harrisburg stuff we just saw, and also some stuff in Maryland that's coming up. There are already full-length I-83 videos on my channel. And there are full-length I-97 videos as well, if you haven't already seen those. So we're not re-watching quite the same video that is already on YouTube. Some of this stuff is new content that's never been seen before.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, it's also, you brought up PA4. It's interesting to note that, the state of Pennsylvania did originally designate all of routes 1 through 9 for major roads throughout the state, even before the U.S. highway system showed up. Exactly one of those numbers is still in its original location, and that is PA8.
So 3 moved. Okay.
Yeah, no, the current 3 is not the original 3.
I would have thought it was like the eastern piece.
It's not, no.
Okay.
And 5 is actually a more or less an extension of New York 5.
Yeah, 5 was numbered to match New York. So PA 9 was the original designation for basically what's now US 20 through Erie County. But yeah, they had their system where the odd numbers went east-west and the even numbers went north-south. So, and 8 got
So backwards relative to the interstate.
and 8 got to stay north of Pittsburgh because they put 19 further west. The original 8 did go south to the West Virginia line, but south of Pittsburgh it was replaced by US 19.
Yeah. And of course, if with Pennsylvania, they have the parent and child route system. So you can see, like, I'll use the old PA4 for example. So you have PA 104, PA 204, I think 304, which is up further north in central Pennsylvania because north of Harrisburg, PA4 was replaced more or less by US 15.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. There weren't necessarily one-to-one replacements there, but yeah, it's a 4 was 111 and then 15.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yep. And yeah, that's why I point out about Lemoyne, because that's actually, so my uncle has a hunting cabin up in central Pennsylvania, and that's where we would always get off of I-83 to then hop over to 11 and 15 to continue north.
Yeah, so 83 was one of the last interstates in Pennsylvania that I clinched. And
Wow.
It was on this trip that I made this video where I got it finished.
So even you've clinched all 376 before this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. That goes
It's
back quite a while.
Yo, come town.
No thanks.
Be careful.
It's so funny to me because of how close I grew up to 83. 83 was probably one of my first full interstates.
Yeah, so 83 is one of those highways that's completely out of the way of anywhere that I would ever be going.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really connect me with anywhere that I would be going anyway. So it's one of those highways that I just never really traveled until the last few years or so. I mean, I had done the section in Baltimore City and I had done the section around Harrisburg, but this, like, for example, this stretch here I had never been on.
Whereas I-83 was probably one of the first interstates in Pennsylvania that I had been on. We took a family vacation to Amish country in Washington, D.C. when I think it was like 7 or 8 or something like that. And we stayed near 83. We took 83 down to Baltimore, then over to Washington from there. So that was one of the earliest interstates in PA I've been by. But it's also, for me, it's like that's not really along the way of where I normally go to in PA. Like if I'm passing through Harrisburg, I'm usually connecting with 15 to head down to Maryland that way. Or if I'm like going like Baltimore, usually I'm working my way towards the northeast from the Baltimore area if I'm driving to or from the area.
I'll now routinely, if I'm coming back from Baltimore, I'll go up 83 to 30 via the secret little connection. But
What is the secret little connection?
in York, if you're heading between 83 North and 30 East or vice versa, there's an exit that saves you a bunch of miles over the...
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And also, too, I mean, a good way to get between, let's say, Baltimore and Washington points north, is you could take 83 to York.
Yep.
And then 30 East, and then 222.
Yep.
From there, and it'll get you pretty much up to Allentown, so you avoid Harrisburg, you avoid the most of the sketchy parts of 78 in PA, and they are sketchy. It's a sketchy this.
Yeah.
And you avoid a lot of the traffic that's basically on like 95 and like the New Jersey Turnpike.
Yep.
Right. Whereas this would have been basically some of the first mileage I deliberately clinched in Pennsylvania, because on the way home from the 2010 Baltimore meet, I took 83 to 81 to 84, heading back to Connecticut.
You all keep mispronouncing Baltimore.
Baltimore, huh?
Yeah.
I pronounce it like I'm from Connecticut. Hey, Wegman's truck.
Connecticut.
No.
You mean
Yes,
It's the
Baltimore.
land of steady habits.
It's funny because I should have mentioned this in the I-97 segment. I-97 was definitely the first interstate that Rainey had clinched. That she had clinched at a day old. Yay!
It's a-
It kind of makes sense.
It's
given
a-
where you live.
No, you should have driven her around the Beltway first.
Now that you mention it,
What?
I'm trying to figure out what the first interstate was that I clinched.
Well, so why, how, and why? You know, considering where we live now in Bel Air, how is it that it was the first one? So I actually gave birth to her did not give birth to her in a hospital, because I'm a little bit granola hippie-ish over here. I gave birth to her in a birthing center just outside of Annapolis in Arnold, Maryland, which unfortunately they closed during the pandemic. Not because of the pandemic. The head midwife that owned it retired and sold the practice. But anyway, so yes, I gave birth to her. Just, very off of Maryland 2, off of an old alignment of actually on Maryland 648. So on, her first, gave birth to her, June 19th, 2019. And then we stayed in a hotel that night. And then June 20th, on our way home, clinched her on it.
You didn't waste any time, did you?
No, definitely had to make sure that we got 97 right out of the way.
You could have clinched Maryland 10 with her, but instead, no, it has to be an interstate.
I can ensure
Well,
there would be no reasonable way to clinch a route from where I was born to where I grew up, because it was in the same town.
I could say the same about myself, yeah.
Yeah.
So
we just in the video we just passed exit 28, which used to be exit 12, and there's still, as of Labor Day weekend, that the sign under the Wendy's still says exit 12. We have a remnant of the old numbering system that was updated.
You still
Hello,
see that a
20 years
lot
ago.
around PA.
Oh, yeah.
So you
was
want
in
to know something funny, actually?
No.
It is entirely possible, although I cannot confirm this, that I-97 was actually also the first interstate I clinched.
Oh.
Now, okay, you might ask, well, how is that? Well, here's how that is. In the spring of when I was not yet 2 years old, my parents went to Washington, D.C., and they stopped in Annapolis on the way home. And so they would have then taken the most direct route home from Annapolis. The challenge is that I-97 was not finished yet at the time, so they only would have driven part of it. The part of it that existed in 1989. So I would have therefore clinched it as it existed then.
If I had
And no more.
Yeah, I had to think about this a little bit more thoroughly. What the first 2DI I would have clinched was, and
Oh boy.
that is that's an interstate that I have become very familiar with as an adult. I-88.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes
Yep.
sense.
I am playing this right now to figure out what the first one I would have clinched in. Not just one state, because that answer would be I-84.
Whereas
Or
whereas if you don't count that, because I would have lost that.
Yeah.
678 probably I would have clinched at a fairly young age.
Yeah.
Whenever the first time I went with my dad to JFK to pick up someone arriving at the airport.
I'm pretty sure I figured out what the first interstate that I clinched was. 195 in Rhode Island and Massachusetts.
All right.
Because we used to go up to Cape Cod every year when I was a kid, so
Yeah.
we clinched
Yeah.
that to go there.
Mine is probably...
Yeah.
Oh, no, I take that back.
I had been thinking for a moment, since Long Island, probably 495.
Yeah, that would have been the first 3DI that I would have clinched.
Yeah.
That
But
I
the-
can say with certainty.
The first time that I went out to Riverhead was when I was 12 years old, and actually, to be fair, we didn't clinch it at the time, because we got off at exit 71. So I was missing the last two exits.
Oh.
Were you going to the Hamptons or something?
No, we were going to the aquarium, and for some reason, the
Oh.
directions had us going through 24 instead of.
I've been to that aquarium.
Yeah.
Well, when I
really
was a
worth
kid,
going
my especially my mom, would like to go to the farm stands out in the North Fork, Long Island. So, we would go out, to Riverhead, and at the time, exit 73, where County Route 58 is.
Yep.
And of course, we were passing through York and I'm having flashbacks.
I wonder why.
And Pennsylvania does allow interstate business loops, as you see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Are there any
and,
others besides this one?
376.
Oh, okay. All the way out.
Yep, those are the two. Yep.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I basically go to out east, and going through Riverhead was a lot easier during the 80s. A lot easier.
A lot of things were easier. There were fewer people.
Yeah. Well, I remember too. I think it was like 4 or 5, and I had to get some sort of like medical testing, and the specialist was in Riverhead, and they put me in a booth where, if I look back at now, it's kind of like those booths where you kind of grab money from, but not quite the same. But yeah, we're in New York now, and you know that there's there's more plans to reconstruct some of the interchanges around York. I know that there was a meet, I think hosted by Jason Ilias,
In central PA.
Right.
that basically focused on one of the interchanges, maybe south of 30.
I think
Yeah,
it
no,
would be-
Down at Shrewsbury, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it would be the craziest first interstate to have clinched, because it would probably be I-17.
Ooh, how exotic.
I was looking
Ah.
around, but being a product of New Jersey, we would just take lots of pieces of interstates. There's no whole interstate, but
Yeah.
the first long trip I was on, we drove between Grand Canyon and Phoenix, so we were taking 17 the whole way. And I don't think it yet existed south of I-10.
Ooh, no. No,
No.
it
did.
17 south of 10 existed before 10 did.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
probably he would have taken that. I don't know. I have no
If
way
it
to
was
prove
pre-1990, then yes.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So
Then yeah,
10
you would
wasn't
have had to
open
have
at
taken
that point.
17. There was no 10.
Right.
Yeah.
So we probably did. We probably clinched that piece. We probably clinched the whole thing.
Back to York.
That section of 17 south of 10 was actually like one of the first sections of freeway in Phoenix to be built.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what my first clinches were. I think that from the auxiliary point of view, it probably would have been 495 in Delaware. Another early one would have been the original iteration of 476 before it was extended. Now, when I was really young, I'm a product of the late 80s. The Blue Route wasn't a thing, at least in its entirety. So my parents, when they would go up to visit my dad's mom in Binghamton, New York, before the Blue Route existed, that was not exactly a fun experience. Because they subjected themselves to US Route 202 up Concord Pike and Westchester.
Before it was improved.
Before that, even.
Yeah.
So they took 202 up to Norristown and linked up with the Northeast Extension there. But
yeah,
I think that was a pretty regular trip that we made, like when I was really young. So I suspect that as soon as the Blue Route was open, I probably clinched it shortly thereafter.
I think all of 202 that is freeway now was freeway then. It just hadn't been widened.
Yeah, it was for. I mean, I remember the widening, but it was from the point where 30 meets it carried quite a bit of traffic.
Right, and the
It
thing is,
needed that upgrade.
that
Yeah.
section of 30 that meets it there wasn't finished until the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was mentioning 495, and actually, another early candidate would have been 684 for me.
Yeah, that's another
Because
one.
of my history going between Long Island and the cabin, which is in the just outside, basically.
And
the
you would have
outskirts
taken
of the
684 to
Catskills.
do that?
Wow.
Your parents
Early.
hate the Taconic that badly?
Well, no, my parents loved the Taconic, but until I think like the Springbrook, the northern part of the Springbrook Parkway, that got built later. That didn't get built until I don't think that opened until like 83, 84.
Yeah, then about.
See, I didn't count 684 because I know we would always use the sawmill to get to 684, so I never had that.
So yeah,
southern
we
part.
would. So we would have taken 680. So probably that.
But
mine
did
is-
you go north of 84 on it? because it goes one more exit.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Ooh, that's a subject of debate, though.
There
I
is
believe
it
ends
is
at
there are
2026,
there are
not
684
84.
signs on it, but
Yeah.
it is internally a New York State reference. route.
981B.
Should I call my mother?
Yep. So I accept both answers.
I would need to see the federal definition of 684 to be sure.
Is this Mount Rose interchange where they're doing? Well, that's basically. I think that was the subject of one of the meets in the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, also, did you get on 684 from the Hutch or 287?
The Hutch. Would it
Then
been
you
the
did-
Hutch?
Yeah,
Yes,
well,
so
then
you
you
were
did
missing
clinch
the
it.
bottom piece.
You have to
Okay,
get
now that's a bit more.
Yeah.
that one's clear. Yeah, you
Yeah.
clinched 984J. Congratulations,
Yeah.
but you did not clinch 684.
I have an interstate. I have a photo of an Interstate 984J shield proving that was his first interstate.
That sign was there for years. It's gone now though.
Didn't this guy take that picture?
984J? No.
That wasn't you?
No, that would have been
wish I
the
had.
famous Otto Yamamoto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure multiple people have pictures of it. But.
Yeah. I saw something on one of the Facebook groups this morning. The new Rudders that opened in Bedford, PA, they have a 4-digit Pennsylvania route shield.
Ooh. Is it on a quadrant route?
1033.
So they signed the quadrant route it's on.
Yes.
Good job.
But regardless of how New York perceives it, it appears that I-684 officially ends at 6202, not at 84.
Per FHWA.
That's what it appears, but I can't find the actual FHWA page that would list that.
Well, maybe-
Well, the thing is also,
495
the
then.
log lists state in miles. It doesn't actually list the specific endpoint, so you'd have to
Yeah.
infer from the mileage.
Right. But it would make sense, and then if the state felt differently, whatever, but that seems to be the federally funded part would end there, which...
You also have to
Sure, makes
watch out
sense.
with the mileage, because they'll do things like lump 984J in with the main line and not list it separately.
Yeah.
I think they do things for things like that, like with 270 in Maryland.
I'm
they'll
willing to
just lump
bet
it
that
in.
because that connects to the Hutch, that probably isn't an interstate at all.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, but
Because you can't drive a truck on it.
Right.
past
okay, you
the
can't
border.
drive a truck on 66 inside the Beltway either.
Yeah, that's a
Mhm.
more recent development. That's a whole different... That's DC. DC gets its own...
Yeah, my point is that saying you can't drive a truck on it does not categorically mean it cannot be an interstate.
Well, no, 278 for a while.
Well, that is
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Until very recently.
Oh, you're talking about I-278 truck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which
The other
is
end
officially,
Oh, so fun-
yeah.
Oh, here
So
comes
fun
Will.
fact,
Yes.
we yes, I know my video is a little delayed, but I know that we recently passed the exit 16 for PA 74 at South Queen Street. That Cracker Barrel is where I may have actually crossed paths with Jason Ilias years before I knew him as a road geek.
Right, because
Yes,
74 is the one that turns into MD 165, which goes to your old stomping ground.
Yes, and was the first Cracker Barrel close to us. And as a kid, I loved Cracker Barrel. And every year on my birthday was like, I'm going to go to Cracker Barrel. So we'd go up to that Cracker Barrel in New York. And what's funny is, timeline-wise, we would have been going to that Cracker Barrel at the same time that Jason Ilias got his start working at Cracker Barrels. So it is very possible that he could have been our waiter, or we could, we could have crossed
probably washed
paths.
your dishes at some point.
He probably did.
You were paying Jason's salary before that became a thing.
That's
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a while since I paid a salary.
And speaking of Jason, the meet that we had in York a few months ago, we had lunch off at the Leander Heights exit, and we had dinner off of the Queen Street exit. There's a Permandi Brothers there.
There's a
At the
lot.
Queen Street
There's a
exit.
lot at that exit.
Yeah.
That is
Yes.
So that
There's
was.
a Permandi Brothers in near Scranton now.
Wow.
Is there really? I
Yeah,
didn't
in
know
Dixon
that.
City.
No shit.
I
didn't
still
know
say
that.
the first is the best. Humanity.
Did that
Yeah.
place just open, or I don't remember there ever being one
I
there.
think it's been open for a couple of years. I know it was
Wow.
open when I passed through there in April.
It's
Well, that gives
listed
me an
in
excuse
Google.
to go through Scranton more often.
It is listed in Google.
It's also,
as
I
open.
think, one of the northernmost.
Yeah, it's the most far flung at this point.
Well, yeah.
Not including
one in
like
Erie.
Florida
There's
or
one in
like.
Erie. That would be the.
Is there one in
northernmost.
Erie now? Okay.
Yeah. No, but I think that's one of the furthest north
Yeah.
Waffle House locations.
Oh my goodness!
Clark
Mission
Summit,
Barbecue
yeah.
has made it up to Trenton area
I,
now.
I wonder what Dwight Schrute would think of Permani Brothers.
Mission Barbecue
of
also
what?
near
Who?
Scranton,
Dwight Schrute,
that
The
is-
Office.
Oh.
Connecticut.
Yeah, he would I'd probably just tend to his bee farm.
Bears beats Battlestar
One
Galactica.
of our guests coming soon would be interested to know that there are Mission barbecues near New Haven and Hartford. They are
Really?
style barbecues, so that.
So Mission Barbecue is Maryland homegrown chain, which is exciting.
Oh, so now calling it Southern makes it fighting words.
No, it is
It
southern.
It is south of the Mason-Dixon line, so it is southern.
I have eaten there enough times to
It's still
vouch.
fighting words.
I can vouch it is authentic barbecue. It is not northern
Speaking of the
style.
Mason-Dixon
In
line,
fact, we should have mentioned that during the I-97 portion because the original Mission Barbecue was opened in Glen Burnie on September 11th, 2011.
Called
Wow.
that
that's-
because they
well,
Glen
that's-
Burnied the food.
I see the one you're talking
The
about.
Mason-Dixon line, we are 10 miles away from it.
yeah. So
Woohoo!
The historical and cultural divide between the North and South is the Mason-Dixon line, which is the border of Pennsylvania and Maryland,
Also the border of Delaware and Maryland.
and the border of Delaware and Maryland. That's right.
speaking of the Mason-Dixon line, in Pennsylvania, the Mason and Dixon, they actually set up their observatory to kind of start figuring out where the exact line was. It's called the Stargazer Stone. It's in Chester County, PA.
Oh,
And you can actually take a short walk there. I actually bumped into it randomly in August, and I wrote an article about it on the Quintessential Pennsylvania blog, which I need to update.
See, if I had known about that, I might have actually stopped there on my Philadelphia meat makeup trip.
The makeup trip.
Well, that's what I did since I had COVID-19. I couldn't go to the meet, so I did a makeup trip a few
Yeah.
weeks
Did
later.
did you drive the itinerary or something, or like what did you do, or did you
So-
just go there to hang out or whatever?
Some of it was stuff from the meet, some of it was just other stuff I felt like
Oh.
doing.
Okay.
So, like, if you've been watching the East Coast Roads updates over the last few weeks, I'm actually working on the stuff from that trip now. So, like, there's US 202.
And you can have people in the comments yell at you for the titles of your pages.
In what sense?
There.
Well, nobody calls it the Delaware Expressway. Yeah,
Oh,
well, up
that
yours.
What?
But
It's a joke.
Yeah, so I posted a link.
listen,
about
some
the
people
Stargazer
watching might not
Stone.
know. It's helpful.
No,
to
it's
explain.
signed on the old
comments.
1960s button copy as such.
It sure is. Damn right.
but yeah, I think it's worth noting that we are now officially in the Baltimore exurbs because pretty much everything between along the 83 corridor south of York is leapfrog sprawl.
Leapfrog. Yes.
Because Baltimore County has a very strict urban-rural demarcation line, and as you'll see when we cross into Maryland, that it'll get pretty rural. It's very rural in northern Baltimore County, relatively speaking, and that's because dense development is not permitted there. So basically, what happened is it leapfrogged over the Mason-Dixon line and exploded in Shrewsbury. It's funny because, I grew up in Jarrettsville, Maryland, which as the crow flies is like 7 miles from the Mason-Dixon line. But anyway, our closest Walmart was in Shrewsbury, and we did a lot of shopping in Shrewsbury. And so it's just mind-blowing to think about how much Shrewsbury has exploded in the past 30 years. From it being like a shopping center, like outside of 83 to BAM! Development everywhere!
Isn't that a big part of the reason why, like, York County is considered, like, part of Metro Baltimore at this point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's Metro Baltimore.
Right. Well, it's also a great example of the pitfalls of attempting to establish urban growth boundaries. Is that when your jurisdiction only extends so far, there's only so much you can actually enforce about that.
Yeah. So like around Toronto and Ottawa, they have the green belts, which is kind of supposed to be a urban growth limit. So what happens when population needs to expand beyond that, they just move to the other side of the greenbelt.
Yeah, so there are quite a number of, Mike brought up in the chat an interesting point that York is kind of the intersection of Philadelphia Eagles territory, Pittsburgh Steelers territory, and Baltimore Ravens territory. You do get a lot of Ravens fans here in York County also.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Because
Right.
they're transplants from Baltimore County or some other part of the metro.
Yeah, York starts to feel like Metro Baltimore.
Yeah,
or like extra
kind of,
Baltimore.
yeah.
More so than Philadelphia. It's the
Yeah.
impression I get.
And there's like a distinct difference
A lot
between...
closer than it is Philadelphia, certainly.
Yeah.
And I think part of it too is, basically, if your family was from Pennsylvania, they may be more, inclined to root for the Pennsylvania teams. As opposed to if they had moved up from Baltimore, you're going to be more inclined to root for the Maryland.
And that's why Shrewsbury is an interesting crossroads community as far as that's concerned, because you do have a lot of transplants who came up from Maryland who have moved into that area. But you also have a lot of native Pennsylvanians who have their own loyalties.
Who
So,
cares?
well, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't particularly care,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, no, I mean, you have more of this leapfrog development phenomenon too. With again on the county level, Montgomery County has their agricultural reserve that's generally off limits to development, but that hasn't stopped people from developing in Frederick County.
Right.
So
Yeah. Right, and as Mike pointed out in the chat, what makes it so what makes Shrewsbury so desirable is that a lot of people who live in Shrewsbury work in Hunt Valley, which is only like 20 miles.
Yeah, all right. At that point, yeah, certainly, yeah.
what is Hunt Valley?
Hunt Valley is the north end of the light rail line.
Yeah.
Exit 20.
Okay.
And don't they have Legends in Hunt Valley?
Wait, what did Doug say?
Don't they have Wegmans in Hunt Valley?
Yes, they do.
Wagners.
And it's a wonderful Wegmans. I've been there many times.
So I should move to Shrewsbury then, that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Well, you should move to Hunt Valley then. That's what you're going for.
Heck yeah, it'd be awesome if you lived in Maryland.
Yeah, so the Shrewsbury interchange here, exit 4, was rebuilt in the years since this video was filmed. It's now a DDI. I think there are quite a few DDIs in Pennsylvania now, but it was one of the first to be built.
Yeah, it's interesting to think how it was only a dozen years ago that the first DDI in the United States ever was built in Springfield, Missouri, and now they're all over the place.
They are literally everywhere.
Yeah, it doesn't take long.
Yeah.
It came from France, like the Coneheads.
Well, because I remember when the first DDI in Delaware was put in, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
But now it's like, oh, everybody's putting up DDIs everywhere, so it's like, well, it's
Right,
not
well, it's
really,
like-
it's not really all that unique anymore.
Just like Spooies were a fad, DDIs are now a fad.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how DDIs, handle the test of time. Whether because they are still a relatively new concept, and DOTs are still experimenting with them.
Because I remember when the first one put in New York, that was in Rochester.
At
590
590,
Road.
yeah. And then the one at Woodbury Commons is a monster.
Yeah.
That's like a supersized DDI.
Well, they need to have a.
Is it a monster on a hill?
Yeah.
It is Woodbury Commons, actually.
Woodbury Commons gets a lot of traffic. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also interesting with these things, though, that when it becomes a fad, there are the proto versions. It's been noted that in Rhode Island it's not really technically a full complete DDI, but it has some of the elements of one, and it as old as I-95 in the area. Likewise, the first Spooey in the country was actually built in Fort Worth, Texas, at an interchange with what at the time was part of US 80. Dates all the way back to the early 60s.
So we are coming up on the Maryland state line. I think what we should do is, Laura, you have notes on 83 in Maryland, right?
Oh, yes.
All right, so why don't we get started on that?
Free land.
If you could kind of summarize Baltimore County, and then maybe we should do like an introduction to the Jones Falls Expressway before we get there.
Yay,
So
Maryland.
Yeah.
we can kind of talk about other things while we're actually going through Baltimore City.
No, that's a good idea.
I have a good idea every once in a while.
You do.
Very so.
I have so many notes. Let me figure out where I want to start.
So this is the state line here, basically, at exit 37.
Yay!
Hey!
You can tell that there was a change of jurisdiction because the video changed.
Yes, there you go.
And there's grass and sight lines and straight roads.
It actually
No
looks
more
like
trucks.
it actually looks like a decent looking freeway now as we enter Maryland. Yeah.
Was
I'm not gritting my teeth anymore.
But we've got sunglasses.
and this is built the way it was because the part in Pennsylvania north of it was completed before the part in Maryland south of the interchange.
So this
Right.
so there has to have then been some interim configuration where the road ended at that interchange.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I guess you would have had to have made a couple turns to get back to old US 111.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess they didn't bother tying it in. It was temporary.
Yeah, which I think in Maryland, I want to say it's Maryland Route 45 is the old Susquehanna Trail.
Yes. We don't call
That's
it.
correct.
Is that the one that
Yeah,
turns
so
to
ba-
dirt relatively quickly?
Yeah, so the northern part
Yeah,
of
that's the other one.
83 in Maryland is the Baltimore-Harrisburg Expressway, and it parallels
Maryland's
Old
45
U-
miles of dirt.
Old US 111, which is Maryland 45, which is known as York Road.
So that raises an interesting question. Does the Baltimore-Harrisburg Expressway name extend into Pennsylvania?
No, that's the Veterans of Foreign Wars Highway, is I think what it's called in
Okay,
Pennsylvania.
I didn't think
That
it
was-
actually went to Harrisburg with that.
I think that name was given more by Baltimore planning officials.
Yeah.
So it may not have necessarily gone up into Pennsylvania.
Okay. Yeah, see, I didn't go that way, so I didn't experience that. I think I got to the end of the U-turn.
Yeah, so I remember the first time I went into Maryland, I was looking at the map of, I-83, so that's what we took. There was the Pretty Boy Reservoir
Oh.
near there, which I look at it now, I think of the Seinfeld episode where, like they had Keith Hernandez, like the second spitter, and was it Newman going, "Nice job, pretty boy." I think Roger McDowell was the second spitter.
Yeah,
I think that's
right.
yeah,
I think
something like
my
that.
plans took me up and then turned to dirt. I was just like, oh.
But yeah, the Baltimore-Harrisburg Expressway predates the interstate system. It was actually, by 1955, was completed from the new Baltimore Beltway north to Shawan Road. So that's exit 20.
Sean? Is he-
With one side completed as far north as Belfast Road. So it was built north. So the Baltimore-Harrisburg Expressway was built from the Beltway north.
No.
I actually don't have a lot of notes on that part. I have like an extensive amount on the Jones Falls Expressway, which is the part south of the Beltway.
So I think that's the more important stuff. So, between now and the time that we reach Timonium, can you kind of tell us a little bit about 83 in Baltimore City?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Timonium and Goomba, what?
What?
That's correct.
Before I do that,
Pass the review,
again, like I said, I have I have a lot of notes. Before I get to the JFX, I want to mention a couple other things about the Baltimore-Harrisburg Expressway part. What's kind of interesting is that there's a lack of state routes that intersect with I-83. And it's very interesting that there's actually no state routes that intersect between the Beltway and Hereford at Maryland 137. Maryland 131 crosses over but doesn't have access. But part of the reason why is because the routes that were established, the state routes in northern Baltimore County, were patterned along the Gunpowder Falls and the towns along the Northern Central Railroad. So most of those, were so you had Maryland 142, which was Whitehall Road, Maryland 143, which is Warren Road, and which have both been decommissioned. And then you have the only one that remains is Maryland 145, which is east of York Road. And the section that doesn't intersect, the section that does interchange with 83, Shawan Road, is not part of the state route. Now, what's interesting is Shawan Road is super wide in that part because that was meant to be part of an alignment of an outer beltway. That was never built. That was the only section of it that ever got built. So that's why in Hunt Valley, again, Hunt Valley was intended to be where the outer beltway was going to intersect, and it's the northern part of the urban-rural demarcation line. So a lot of businesses and stuff developed there, northern end of the light rail line. So it's supposed to be the northern edge of, it was planned to be sort of like the northern edge of, the very dense metropolitan area. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that I-83, as you go south, is non-contiguous. So what happens is the Baltimore-Harrisburg Expressway, it comes into 695 and then is concurrent for 1.4 miles, and then you exit off to go to then you exit off to go to the Jones Falls Expressway. What's really interesting about that is that you don't lose any lanes there. So there's 2 lanes of 83 that are maintained, and you can stay in those lanes as it kind of, almost is like just plopped right next to, although they are, the lanes are open, you can go in between 695 and 83. But the 2 highways are there, and the 695 maintains its 3 lanes on each side, I-83 maintains its 2 lanes on each side. So that section, when they come together, is 5 lanes.
Yeah,
But
so
why
like
it's
Tilly
that way
Park.
is because... Oh, go on.
No.
You
go.
I'd much rather
I'm good,
listen
no.
to you anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, there were 2 other alignments that were proposed. One was the original plan inside the Beltway, and then the second one was an attempt outside of it was an attempt to reconcile things after the fact. But both were shelved due to the community opposition. But basically, the first plan alignment for the northern Jones Falls Expressway would have continued north up the Jones Falls Valley past Lake Roland through Ruxton and Ratterwood, roughly along the current light rail tracks to the current Harrisburg Expressway. But in order to bypass that, the northern end was shifted west to parallel Falls Road. And then the second attempt at a link between the 2 disjointed parts took place in the 1970s. And that would have extended north from the current JFX and at Brooklynville, northeast to the Harrisburg Expressway, just north of Padonia Road, near where it curves northward. But again, that was shelved due to community opposition. So instead, what we got are the 2 slightly staggered 83s. And so, actually, when you listen to traffic reports through this part of the Beltway, it was referred to as going between the 83s or through the 83s.
That is a neat little bit of local lingo there, right?
Yes, it is. But that's pretty much what I've got on the Baltimore-Harrisburg Expressway. The Jones Falls Expressway.
Yeah, so we're not going to get there for a few minutes, but I think it's important that we set the scene for you now before we get there. So, Laura, go ahead.
Yes. So what's very interesting about the Jones Falls Expressway is that it's one of Baltimore's original expressways. It was conceived as far back as the original 1943 plans when Baltimore city officials contracted Robert Moses to create a highway plan for the city. The Jones Falls Expressway was to serve as the northern radial route, and then the east-west expressway would have been in the Franklin-Mulberry corridor. But anyway, later in 1951 is when the Baltimore City Planning Commission unveiled more detailed plans for the Jones Falls Expressway. And in 1952 is when voters approved a $10 million bond measure to pay for the city's share of the expressway, which under the original federal aid financing plan, the city and state together were to come up with 50% of the cost, with the federal government picking up the other half of the cost. But things got slowed down due to community disruption, particularly in the Mount Rural Terrace area. And that actually worked in, the city's favor because basically once the Federal Aid Highway Act came online and the funding switched to be 90% federal, then the federal government pretty much footed almost the whole bill. But the city council formally approved the highway in 1955, and then final design plans were accelerated. But then, they waited until the Federal Aid Highway Act, and then that's when they started work on it. So the groundbreaking was October 2nd, 1956. It was finished in 1963. It was built. So a big reason why it was one of the only highways in Baltimore that got built without, a ton of roadblocks is because they literally built it over top of the Jones Falls River.
Yay.
If there's yay! Let's just, cover up the river. It's gross and polluted anyway. And then we don't have to worry about buying out a bunch of rich white people.
I mean, and you look at early interstates, in a lot of places the river was just moved to be next to the interstate. Like one in New Jersey I'm familiar with, 287, they moved the Rockaway River to be right next to the interstate. So you'd be either be on top of it or next to it, but now you would never move the river, you'd have to move the road.
Yeah, or in Hartford too, the Whitehead Highway.
Right. The other thing to keep in mind here is that, while today people love their waterfronts, in the 1950s, certainly, that mindset did not exist. Waterfronts in cities were usually old industrial areas, not considered anywhere desirable. So the idea of covering up or the river or plowing a highway, by the standards of the time, it was a great place to put it. There's a reason it kept happening that way. It wasn't because anyone had some crazy scheme where they wanted to destroy every city's waterfront. No, it was at the time no one cared about the waterfront.
Yeah.
Right, and the sad thing is there actually were plans that were created to create a Jones Falls Valley Park, which would have been a ribbon park that would have taken advantage of the river valley. It was going to be designed by Baltimore architect George Konstritsky, but instead they were like, we don't care about the river. Let's just bury it in a bunch of conduits.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is basically what they did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's worth noting is that the original Jones Falls Expressway, when it was conceived, so the plans kept shifting for what the east-west highway was going to be. So original plans, there was going to be a huge 3-level crossing at the Orleans Street Viaduct, because the original east-west expressway that was going to go through was going to go along the 40 corridor. And so...
And that's the Franklin Mulberry also. That's where that...
Right, that would have...
Yeah.
Oh, the I-170. Okay.
That was the original.
Well, I-170 was never planned to extend east of where that freeway ends, but
I think they did look at Franklin Mulberry as an alignment for the original east-west.
Yeah.
Correct. So the part of the Franklin Mulberry that got built, the highway to nowhere, that was always a part of one highway plan or another. Like the very original plans had that as going as an east-west expressway along the 40 corridor through the city. Then later, what happened was it was, as part of the 10D plans, it was going to divert south, where it ends today, and then go across, the Pratt Street corridor. And then 83 was going to end at a giant interchange, pretty much at the mouth of the Jones Falls River and the harbor. So basically, today, where Pratt Street and President Street and Pratt Street and President Street and the Jones Falls River all kind of intersect is where 83 would have ended. And there are these grand drawings of this, big, beautiful bridge, and it would have been 14 lanes of highway there. The conceptive drawings were not realistic at all. It was look how pretty this nice little bridge is going to be, and it was really going to be 14 lanes of highway.
That would make Baltimore more attractive to people, I think.
they should have built a connector between the two. Then they could have called it the Pratt Falls.
The pratfalls.
Oh,
The other thing that was interesting is that original plans also called for there to be turnoff lanes for buses to pick up and discharge passengers.
There was a lot of weird stuff in the 50s.
Because
Yeah.
83 was also built in the along where the Maryland-Pennsylvania Railroad used to go through, as well as the North Central Railroad. All used to both go through the Jones Falls Valley. So the thought was that, we could add bus service along here. So think of it as like a predecessor, I suppose, to Bus Rapid Transit. A very, very early predecessor to Bus Rapid Transit. But yeah, that was canceled in 1954.
I would just like to point out at this time that we've picked up a couple more people who
Yeah.
have showed up to the headquarters here.
They have nothing to do with Maryland, though.
I couldn't think my way around Maryland.
Yeah,
There
a bunch
you
of,
go.
It's Corco!
Hey, Corco's
Hi,
here.
Kelly!
Kelly's here too.
Hi,
No, you
Kelly!
get to navigate the next section of freeway.
Kelly.
All right, Kelly's doing the play-by-play from here.
I'm driving in a car.
Yes.
I would believe that.
But yeah, because they built it over the river, they did severe design compromises when they built the Jones Falls Expressway. Basically, the speed limit was kept at 50 miles an hour within Baltimore City, and the Public Works Director Bernard Warner admitted in an interview in 1968 that they knew the design standards couldn't be met, but they had to pretty much, do what they could to compromise in order to get the federal funding, because they were balancing trying to keep the industry in the valley as well as get the federal funding. So wherever we could widen out, we did. Whatever we could get without compromising industry, we did. Some of the curbs aren't designed for 60 miles per hour. We needed more land, but we couldn't get the property.
Well, that doesn't stop people from trying, though.
No, although this year in 2022 they've installed several speed cameras along 83.
Yes, there are now
because
speed cameras on 83 in Baltimore City.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Ooh, hiss, hiss.
I'm never clinching it again. Thank you.
you know what though? I hate to say it, but this is a case where it actually is, if they're put in the right places, is actually useful, because if you drive down 83, and you'll see it as we get to, especially the very windy section in between the Cold Spring Lane and 28th Street exits, like the Jersey barriers have so many black marks on them, it's unreal, because of people taking those curbs way too fast and then losing control and then causing accidents.
Well, I think the one curve around Baltimore Penn Station is like signed at 40 miles an hour, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, signed as an advisory speed or as a speed limit?
I think there might be 40-mile-an-hour speed limit signs there.
It's a speed limit sign.
Yeah.
All right, so you can go up to 52 and not get a ticket.
If that's where they put the speed camera.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
right. So under Maryland state law, a camera cannot give you a ticket for speeding unless you are going more than 12 miles an hour over the limit.
That's pretty typical.
That's correct.
For most
Yeah.
jurisdictions.
Yep. And
Here we are now between the 83s on the Beltway.
In the reptilian heart.
Yep.
The oxygenated dioxygenated
This is the
blood
first
mix.
part of 83 I clinched.
Yep.
Probably
Ooh.
now.
Might have been mine too, yeah.
And I think with like speed cameras in Maryland and construction zones, usually they put them near the porta-johns, I believe.
There's actually a specific reason for that, and that's
Porta-johns. That one I have not heard before.
Or honey, yeah,
I've
or
heard porta-potty and rent-a-john.
yep, or out in Oregon they call them honey buckets.
Okay.
Yes.
the reason for that is because in order to operate a speed camera in a work zone, it actually has to be a staff member there operating it. So the staff member needs a place to pee.
See, Doug, I just like to refer to people by name no matter what part of... Never mind.
So we exit the Beltway just as soon as we enter it onto 83 South, which is now the Jones Falls Expressway that Laura's given us a pretty good introduction to. We will be entering Baltimore City in a couple of minutes. I do want to mention that Pimlico Downs is right off of the 83 at Northern Avenue, I think. That's the exit that's closest to it.
Northern Parkway.
Northern Parkway. So that's in the vicinity as well. There are a couple other things that we'll talk about as we make our way south here, but you will know at the end of this video that 83 ends in a very somewhat random location right in the middle of downtown without any other connection to any other freeway. And maybe we could talk for a second about why that happened that way, and also the proposed Fells Point tunnel,
Yes.
which also didn't. It was a nice idea and concept. I don't think it ever stood a chance from an engineering and cost perspective.
I can vouch the drive is a lot more fun without the speed cameras.
I don't disagree with that.
You would come down to the end at 70 miles an hour and just everyone would hit the brakes. Hit the brakes.
Jones into some falls.
Yeah.
And if you're not paying attention, a bill will come to your house.
Now it will.
Now they will, yeah.
It's good to hear about all this.
So 83 ends.
If you survive, you'll get a bill.
Yeah.
So before we get there, we are going to be coming up to the Northern Parkway exit, and I will just mention that Northern Parkway is a registered trademark of Long Island.
Here we go.
Here we go.
No.
So Baltimore is hereby ordered to cease and desist.
Baltimore had it first.
It's not the Northern State Parkway. Calm down.
Are you saying that Cal Ripken is a fraud?
Well, I mean, we all know that anyway. But
No, he's not. Kevin is not a fraud.
Top people. Hey.
Well, let's talk about why 83 abruptly ends.
Yeah, so 83 ends where it does, right at the perimeter, right outside the Inner Harbor there. Yeah, Laura, what can you
Take a shot in the tower as to why.
briefly summarize why things are the way that they are down that way?
Yeah, so remember I mentioned that there was going to be, this huge, interchange of I-70 and I-83 and I-95, right there at the Inner Harbor. That was going to only cause the loss of 4,800 homes. So naturally, it caused a huge, major opposition over these highways being built on the west side and in the east side neighborhoods. In particular, Rosemont in. I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And at this point, it is now maintained by the city of Baltimore, too.
That is correct.
Yes. But yeah, so on the west side was Rosemont, and on the east side was Federal Hill and Fells Point, which are two of the oldest neighborhoods in Baltimore City. So basically, what happened is you had several different. So at first, these started as separate groups. A lot of them were neighborhood based, but then eventually, in brief, they united as larger fronts to protest the highways. So basically, some of the big names are RAM, Relocation Action Movement, CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, the Society for Preservation of Federal Hill, Montgomery Street, and Fells Point, and the Southeast Council Against the Road. And they organized in a mass So RAM and CORE successfully organized a mass convergence on City Hall in June 1967 to demand fair placement value for homes rather than their market price. And so as a result, they were able to approach the FHWA with the mayor to negotiate fair pricing. And then as this is all happening, they released a new plan called the 3A plan. So in 1967, Maryland officials formed a design concept team of engineers, planners, and architects to redesign the highway plan. So in 1968, they proposed the 3A plan in Baltimore City. So what that would have done was move I-95 further south and extend I-83 from where it currently ends. It would have continued down what is today President Street, would have turned right at about where Fleet Street is, and would have still gone through Fells Point and the Canton neighborhoods. So while Federal Hill would have been spared, Fells Point and Canton were still on the chopping block. And
yeah, so let's sum it up by just saying this. A lot of the way that they came up with to kind of avoid that was to put 83 in a tunnel. There was going to be a lengthy tunnel under Fells Point. and that it would have emerged somewhere out in the Canton area, near where I-95 and 895 cross each other. There's actually some stub ramps there around the Boston Street exit on 95, which were built as placeholders for future access to 83, that 83 extension.
Are these different from the windless freeway stub ramps?
Yes, these are different.
Okay.
Yeah.
There were
Long story short, cost. This was now the 1970s, so this project was subject to environmental review and standards that had not been in place before, and there were other priorities that were much higher on the list, like completing I-95 and completing the 395 spur into downtown. And so 83 kind of fell into like the second rank of things on the to-do list, and as a result, it never really had much of a chance of happening. Would it have been nice to have? I guess. You certainly wouldn't have had to pay a toll if you were coming into downtown from 95 from the east, and there's no indication that tunnel under Fells Point would have been tolled. I should clarify that
What
point.
were you going to tell it?
Well, I mean, all the other tunnels in Baltimore under the harbor are tolled, but what made the 83 tunnel proposal interesting was that tunnel was not going to be part of the MDTA jurisdiction. So
Correct.
It would not have had a toll associated with it, which would have distinguished it from its neighbors.
But yeah, the high costs, basically, its cost was estimated at $609 million and expected to exceed $1 billion by the time it was scheduled for completion by 1987. So they removed the extension to I-95 in September of 1982.
Yeah.
And so that's when, to connect the dead-end stub of I-83 to the street grid, engineers designed a transition from viaduct to surface boulevard. South of the expressway's terminus at Fayette Street, they widened about 3/4 of a mile of President Street along the eastern edge of the Inner Harbor, and the final section of expressway was completed in 1987. But yeah, so basically, how it continued at the end was, that they slowly built, the viaduct sections, right? So they built the section connecting Gay and Monument Streets in 1977, and then extended it down to Pleasant Street in 1983, and then finished it all the way down to connect to Fayette and then into President Street in 1987.
Yeah, so this is the final mile of 83 as we enter downtown from the north. Yeah, and as you'll see, the freeway just kind of sort of ends at a traffic light here as we come around the next corner.
With old button copy.
It's still there.
Yep.
It's still there even in 2022.
There's Baltimore.
Yeah, well,
What are they going to spend money on?
Well, there's a lot of old stuff still around, even though some of it has disappeared in recent months.
You could put I-170 in today's presentation too.
I think we covered that pretty amply in the Baltimore webinar.
But it's an interstate clinched video. Yeah.
It's interesting that, the sign here says expressway ends. The sign on 170 says freeway ends.
This is the JFX, not the JFF. So.
Yep. So that's the interstate ends here.
Yep.
There is no connection to any other mainline
Unlike
interstate.
South Carolina, it doesn't continue for a few more lights.
No.
I think it's worth noting that there have been many different proposals over the past 20 years, proposed by graduate students, proposed by, former city planners, by various firms to daylight the Jones Falls and to basically take down the viaduct. And different proposals have it go, taking it down at different points, whether going up to Eager Street or just to Chase Street or whatever. But long story short is that Baltimore City, last I heard, their official standpoint is we don't really need to worry about that for like 20 more years, and it'll be really expensive to take down the viaduct. So they basically aren't really entertaining the idea right now. But there's been a lot of proposals. In fact, one of those proposals even won an award. I want to say it was ASLA, which I think is the Association of Landscape Architects, in 2010.
When are they getting married?
So there's been a lot of different proposals because there's a city whose name I cannot pronounce in South Korea where they did remove a freeway. And now I can't find the name of that city.
It was South Korea, not Japan. Okay.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
The Cheongi River Project.
Yeah,
It was basically there was a freeway there, and it was decommissioned and taken down, and now the river was completely opened up, and now people are able to use it more recreationally. But yeah, the city. Oh, go on.
Yeah.
But yeah, the city is not entertaining it, and I wish I remember when I saw an official presentation, but I remember them quoting numbers that were like 2049. They were basically like, we don't need to worry about this till 2049. That basically they're just kicking the can down the road, and I think their official stance.
The at the end of its design life. So I mean, it
Correct.
makes sense from that perspective. You don't tear it down while it's still got life left in it. The question is okay, when it's done and you got to replace it or get rid of it, that's when you got to make a decision.
Right, and basically they've not entertained or given any notion of what that decision would be.
So is the idea that I-83 would just be truncated?
It would have to be at that point, yeah.
Not that it would be
replaced. Probably an X-83 would continue the freeway portion south of 695, is my guess.
Oh, well,
so probably
still just keep I-83 for the part that remains.
Well, it depends where it ends, because interstates are supposed to not end in the middle of a downtown like that.
They're supposed to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's why.
If you ended it at 40, that's one thing, but depends where they're planning to rip this out to.
I mean, as it is, 83 ends at not another numbered route. So if it already does, why can't it? Well,
that's just because that's
somewhere else.
Well, they intended it to. That's a different issue.
Gonna wanna shut up.
Well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, basically, like I said, there's been several different, proposed plans. I mean, I've even heard of people saying, let's take it all the way up to Northern Parkway. But I think my opinion, and this is my opinion alone, is that personally, I think that you could extend President Street north to meet, if you were to take out the viaduct. I think the challenging thing that a lot of people don't think about is that the way that 83 ended for quite a while is that it just used to dump everybody into Mount Vernon. That's why you have so many of those standard exits, like boom, boom, boom. You suddenly had Maryland Avenue exit, St. Paul Street exit, Mount Monroe Avenue exit, because they were when the freeway just sort of ended in the 80s, it just dumped everybody into the Mount Vernon neighborhood, and Mount Vernon does not want the highway to go back to that.
Yeah, I mean,
so
you also have to keep in mind here too is that you're talking about, okay, fine, you're potentially tearing down a viaduct and replacing it with, the surface road. So you're not freeing up any land for development. You're not really creating parkland. You're taking what's currently a grade separated road and making it a non-grade separated road, and therefore making sacrifices both on traffic throughput and on safety, since people can get killed crossing roads at grade that they can in ways they cannot be if they're crossing over or under them. After all, so it's one of those things where it would get spun various ways, but ultimately you'd be talking about doing that. If that was done, it would be because it's cheaper. It would be the reason it would be done that way. It's because they don't have money building a new viaduct.
Ultimately, it would be the cheaper aspect, but also to, going back to what we've talked about in previous episodes this season about the psychological and sociological aspect. And we're talking about taking down a viaduct where the speed limit is 40 anyway, and where it gets backed up at, the Fayette Street traffic light. Like, it's the sort of thing where it's like, okay, at that point, what's the difference if it's a boulevard? It's already sort of functioning as a raised boulevard.
You move the backup back a little.
I've been downtown during rush hour, and both President and the cross streets can get very, very dicey there. So there's an aspect of you should be looking at improving the connectivity of 83, not reducing it.
I mean, I mean, my thought is I'm open to daylighting. I think it's a huge challenge, and I think another sign that Baltimore City is not really thinking about that is in regards to the recent Central Avenue project. So Central Avenue is a little bit east of downtown, but it's basically built over the old Hartford Run. And and this is a project that's like just now finishing in 2022, and they did not daylight that river. They didn't care about daylighting it. It was never a consideration. And it was basically a lost opportunity that they didn't even decide to make a more complete street until like at the last minute. Like, oh, maybe we should put bike lanes here, huh? But yeah, so I think that there's a lot of challenges that go beyond the roads when it comes to daylighting it, because I think a big appeal of removing the freeway is if you can then restore the river and make it some sort of, Jones Falls Valley Park.
Right, and the thing is that in order to do that, you then have to completely lose the function of the traffic throughput, because now you can't put it somewhere else instead.
Right. And so I think this is where projects like we talked about a couple weeks ago with Syracuse will be an interesting case study. Because if you were to, remove some or all of the Jones Falls Expressway, that traffic would ultimately filter onto local streets. And could the streets handle it? Yes, no.
Well, you'd also have a lot of destroyed demand.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Diverted.
Well,
a lot would be diverted, some would be lost, but a lot would just move to other roads or other modes, and
people who lived on the north side of the city would start saying, "I'm not driving downtown anymore. It's a pain in the ass to get there. Traffic's too bad."
So there's the so-called induced demand, which is really latent demand that isn't being accommodated. That works when you introduce a highway. So when you take one away,
the same principle.
We need a term for the opposite of induced demand, where you're now reducing the ability of people to use a corridor.
De-induced demand.
Well,
so it works both ways. But
I'm calling it destroyed demand because the term demand destruction is used in economics when the price, the monetary price of something is raised high enough that people stop being willing to buy it.
I view this as a negative. I view induced demand or satisfying the demand, the latent demand that's there that you don't know about, should be a primary goal of transportation, but not to destroy what's there, but to find ways to accommodate it. And this really, in this context, they should be looking at this, and the tunnel is the most appealing option, so let's do it.
Yeah, more work for us engineers.
Yeah.
Send lots of money.
That's right. Send
tunnels everywhere.
Yep. Hey, it gives us an excuse for another Baltimore beat, right?
Yay. And another tunnel tour like we did in Seattle.
Yeah, that's right. Did anybody have any
Mission barbecue?
You can do that. Anything but Pizza John's.
No! I love Pizza John's! Do not hate on my Pizza John's!
Laura, it's not even pizza.
It is! It's Maryland pizza, and it's the best.
There is no such thing.
This is another reason why
why she didn't come up here.
Why I'm very upset that we couldn't do the show in Maryland, because then she could yell at me about Cal Ripken and Pizza John's in person, and it would have been so much better.
And
we could have had Pizza John's in person.
And if
at the party.
If we were in Maryland, I might have actually gone to Pizza John's to judge for myself.
Yeah.
And you know what that judgment would be.
That you know better.
Yeah.
And we're from New York.
Listen, there's such a thing as morbid curiosity.
It would be you would be dying if you went there. Yes.
How much am I willing to bet that I have had worse?
Will be there.
I have.
I know I have.
No, for you.
Yeah.
I went to school in Boston. I learned where bad pizza was there. So.
There's the old pizza pub in Oswego, and this is going back 20 some odd years, and they had really disgusting pizza, but it was cheap.
Yay!
So
that's what my work does.
Yeah, but it was really bad with pizza standards compared to other really bad places. So it was really bad.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been as bad as Altoona style pizza though.
Aww. I love cardboard.
cardboard with American cheese on it.
Yay.
Yeah.
And pickles.
But did you know the pizza capital of the world is in Pennsylvania? Old Forge near Scranton.
Why? What do they make there? That's
Well, they have, it's kind of like a Sicilian pizza, but they call themselves the pizza capital of the world. They've had the pizza from there. It's alright.
Yeah, okay, self-declared. No.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
No.
I mean, what else do they have going on in small town in Pennsylvania? That's it.
Decay.
Yeah, crippling depression.
Occasionally a giant
The
fire.
Office.
World
Joe
Trade Center.
That is
Biden's
their
house.
strength, yeah.
I don't know.
They do have a Primanti's up there.
They do. Which, now that you mention it, that's like another reason for me to go out that way.
Yeah, well, at the end of this, I assume we're going out there to have some.
I think we should drive an hour and a half out to Scranton to have Primanti.
We have time, and it's right down 84. So
Road trip.
let's go. I see no reason why we can't do that.
I think Kelly's been in the car long enough.
She'll hold down the fort for us here.
Whenever we have you all back over here later this winter to do another episode, we will have to cater via Pizza John's so that y'all can try it without having to pay for it.
Yeah, I'm gonna be busy that weekend, Laura.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I have to get my goldfish.
That pizza may end up in
Boo!
Well,
Do we have any closing thoughts on the programs that we did tonight? Anything that you guys want to add?
I know you too well. I knew you were going to say, "Do you have any closing thoughts?" And those
Yeah.
exact words.
Smash that subscribe button and join the RotoWiz family if you have not done so already.
I just want to note that I didn't get a chance to get this comment in earlier, but I think Severe Design Compromises sounds like a good name for a metal band.
Hells yeah.
In 6th grade, I labeled my 3.5-inch floppy disk heavy metallic porn. It has cat on it. And I was just like, someday I'm going to find this hilarious.
Okay.
I can't open it now on any computer, so it's pointless. But
Laura, anything out of you?
No, thank you for the opportunity to call in, even though, we're all here under quarantine with COVID. Thanks for still having me on the episode, and thanks so much to Dan G for being here on his first show.
yeah.
Yay.
And Laura, you're sounding very good over there, so I'm glad that it's a mild case this time.
Yeah, definitely agreed there.
Alright,
Mild case could be a brand of luggage.
No, it's kind of music certain people listen to.
All right, well, I think we'll wrap up here. I'd like to thank Doug and Steve and Anthony and David and the other David, a.k.a. Corco, and Kelly, who were late. The two of them were latecomers, but it's always good
They're
to
part
have
of it.
them.
Did
Yep.
I even say anything? But that's
No,
fine.
I
You just did.
Well, you just did.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us. Happy New Year, everybody. Go out and
Yay.
celebrate tonight. Don't drink and drive, all that shit. No,
Well,
seriously.
Don't drink alcohol and drive.
Yeah, that.
Other things.
Yeah,
go for
okay.
it.
Enjoy your New Year's weekend and festivities, everybody. We'll see you next week for the Atlanta show. I hope this show was useful for all of you and you got something out of it. Thank you for watching.
You're welcome. Now I know I don't ever want to drive through Harrisburg again.
Yay!
I never want to drive 83 in Baltimore again.
Yay!
Don't drive high, you'll be out of your mind.